Welcome back to episode 2 of season 2. We are very excited, and if you're watching us, you'll see that we have a great face here, great face, great arms, and we'll leave that there. But we're excited to be back at Crossroads, and it's an exciting season. We talked about it. We'll get into it right now, but just so you know, we're going to be interviewing a couple people this season, so we're very excited to start with that. But before we get into who we're interviewing, let's just go around and see what our check-in is like. Sheriff, you want to start us off?
Sure.
How's your week going? How's it been since last we talked?
Man, it's been a hectic couple of weeks. Work has been extremely busy. Work has also been extremely hot. And it
Some
is
of the hottest months too.
Yeah, it has been.
In this area.
More than the last couple of years, I feel like it's just been very hot.
Yeah. Very hot. If I'm not mistaken, I think July was the hottest month on record worldwide.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I believe it.
So it's just hot.
Crazy. It's crazy.
All over the place. Florida is hot regardless of, what the globe is doing. It's always hot in Florida, but it's unseasonably hot.
Yeah.
It seems like this year. And so at work, the AC has decided to go out. It is
protesting.
It has seen better days. It's on strike. It refuses to work. It refuses to work in these inhumane conditions. Exactly.
Yeah, that's rough, man.
Yeah.
That's
So
rough. That's rough.
So it's been pretty hot. Our break room at some points has been getting up to the upper 80s. In terms of temperature, it's been
Not a lot of relaxing.
People's M&Ms are melting on the shelf.
Who heated up my soup? Cooking eggs on the table. Just
fry them up.
That's messed up, man.
Yeah. So
you're going outside to cool off, man.
At this point. That's been a little bit of a challenge the past couple of weeks. Also had a really major presentation that I had to do last week Friday.
Okay.
And so all of last week, just preparing for that, I ended up putting in, what was that, maybe 14 or 15 hours.
In a day, in a shift?
On Thursday. I got to work about 8 o'clock. Somebody do the math. I'm sure I messed up.
You got home like 9, 10 o'clock? You worked?
I left work at 11 p.m.
I saw you put that on Instagram. I was about to ask, but I was like, man.
What's that all about?
So my presentation was first thing Friday morning, 8:30. And I had to make sure that everything was together. And obviously, as you're working on this presentation during the week, there's other stuff that's popping up. And so, you can't just sit down and say, all right, I'm going to take my 8-hour shift and take care of this. You've got other things that you have to do. So it came down to crunch time. I was like, I just got to do it.
You were by yourself?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So when I left,
it's like 15 hours, yeah.
I left and I walked out. I saw one janitor and 4 cars in the parking lot. That was it.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's been a long week. Yeah. The presentation went well though, so all the hard work paid off. It all paid off. So this week should be a lot smoother, a lot quieter. Leave work a lot earlier. And for those who know me, like I'm not a stay late kind of person. I put in.
It's like
look,
time to go.
Stanley's
like, gotta go.
The meeting's not done.
No matter what's happening, he's leaving.
My philosophy is, if I'm at work, they don't want me to do personal things.
Right.
So on my personal time, I don't want to do work things.
Yeah.
Right.
That makes sense.
I want to have a balance.
Sounds like the George Costanza
School of Business.
Yeah.
I mean, that's typically how I am. But again, when crunch time shows up, when things have to get done, I'm going to do what I need to do to get it done. So that's been the past couple of weeks.
Might just leave it there, man. I don't know.
I almost feel guilty, man, because I've been kind of like.
OG's like I've kept my routine of daily what are you saying, daily massages.
Oh yeah. No, man. But look, like it's funny because like with this time of year, typically in Florida for healthcare, it slows down a little bit. A lot of snowbirds are gone and people are leaving and stuff. So this time of year, it's actually pretty nice, man. Like I've been getting out of work, usually 4:30, 5 o'clock.
Nice.
Which sounds, I guess, for me, it's not normal. Like I was working until 7, 8 o'clock.
Right. I mean, that might be a normal work for some people, yeah.
But no, it's been nice, man. I'm actually feeling kind of relaxed today. I had air conditioning at work, so that's a big thing. You know what I mean?
Some people don't have that, man. That's
good. Be grateful.
Be grateful.
Yeah. Grateful. Count the small blessings.
The small blessings. But no, life is good, man. We had a good weekend.
Good.
So the last couple weeks it's been pretty good. Work's doing good, but it's a nice break in a way. It's not crazy.
Yeah.
So
So and things have been good for us.
We had a big weekend, man.
We had a big weekend.
You got to talk about
this. We had a big weekend. So
that was a high point for I think everybody.
I didn't want to say it, but if you're listening to the podcast, I do feel like I have come up with a more elevated understanding of Scripture.
Just overnight.
Just overnight. It's kind of like when you turn 20, you're like, it makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, you hit 30, you're like, now I know. So, you know,
it's an awakening.
There's this weekend, I'm just all jokes aside. I've been joking all weekend like that, like, you know.
It was a big weekend, man.
It was.
The thing is,
It was.
I got to say this before you even say what it is. Like, there was an amazing turnout at our church.
It was, yeah.
I don't know how many people were there, like family, friends, but it was packed. It was standing room only.
Yeah.
And that just shows how much people appreciate you and your ministry and everything else. So
it was very special. Yeah. So for those, you know, that are watching and listening and maybe don't know, we had our ordination pretty much. I liked how Pastor Marcus and some others said it because, you know, this whole week people were like,
what is that?
People were like, we're so glad that you're finally becoming a pastor. Or you're going to be a full pastor now. We're so, you know, you're not a kid pastor. You're an adult pastor now. And I was like, all right, well, no, I've been a pastor for the last, like, whatever. So what it is, you know, it's ordination. It's pretty much, you know, your leaders and different people that are over you, your bosses, whatever, they come and just lay hands on you to just, in a good way, right? It's just blessing you, not to beat you up. And just to confirm that God's calling is on your life, right? So Pastor Marcus said it's not that we're doing anything special; it's just that we're just recognizing what God's already been doing, right? So I wrote on I put a video up today, and it was a nice. I feel like it was this whole week leading up to it in the weekend. It was like that moment. We've talked about that, right? Being able to get your flowers before your funeral, right? It kind of felt like that moment. Where it was just, you know, being able to just sit around with people, family, and just kind of relive things, and myself just rethinking stuff. So it was a nice moment where you're able to look back and see, you know, how God has led you, and then be able to be, you know, have people be like, hey, yeah, we see God's calling. What I loved a lot is that our conference does it at the church you're serving at. You know, other conferences will do it during camp meeting, and they'll sometimes do like 5, 6, 7, 8 pastors
at the same time.
So everyone comes up with your spouse, prayer.
Oh no!
So this is special because it's unique.
It was almost like a wedding, man. Like
when I walked in there, they started clapping for Chantal and I.
Man, they had a nice
the cake stuff. I was waiting for them like, hey, come cut the cake.
Like, yeah, they had a potluck after the ordination ceremony, and this potluck. I mean, they had the fancied silverware out.
Like,
you know, they were showing you some serious love, man. That's pretty cool. I thought that was kind of neat. That was neat.
Yeah, so
and the food. I'm not a big potluck person,
but it was good.
But I was like, let's stay. You know, Sebastian's family and all that stuff. And the food was actually pretty good, man. I was like, all right, let's go.
Yeah, so it was great weekend. You know, we have my in-laws still here, so but you know, a lot of family friends that came. So it was a great time. Obviously, having you guys there too was awesome. So yeah.
One Accord sang.
One Accord sang,
which is always nice.
Which is always nice. So check it out. And
you guys did great.
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. So just a very, very emotional weekend though. It was just they threw some curveballs, man. Just from the song in the beginning. That set the curve. I was like, okay, now we're doing this. And then my mom going to buy like just every.
It was a lot.
It was a lot because I'm like. You know, I had to say, you know, you plan the program, you know, who's here. And I'm like, okay, you guys just curve.
Your mom is super nice too, man. I don't know her very well, but she just seems like a very real, genuine, warm person, man. Like I like your mom, man.
Yeah.
She's real
down to earth and real cool. So so big blessing, but I appreciate you guys. But
absolutely
sweet. Well, we got our guest here, Tom. Thanks for your patience and waiting, and appreciate you coming on. This is the first for the Crossroads podcast. So. Before we go into, you know, even more questions about you, tell us a little bit how your week was, and we'll get into who you are a little bit later.
No, I actually had a really good week. I would say, you know, my air conditioner worked. So
that's a plus.
That was a good thing, right?
That's good.
So my commute was just up to the top of my stairs, so that's always
nice.
That's
always
best life right now.
That's living life.
You guys know my wife has a broken foot right now, so I've definitely been nursing that injury from the perspective of I don't have to travel right now for work. Kind of set that up. So
that's
it's nice being home for a couple of months without having to travel.
Right.
I'd say the downside is that, you know, I'm also now the maid, the chauffeur,
a
permanent dog walker.
Right.
So now I've really my mop skills are strong.
And then when she's better, there's a chance some of this stuff might actually continue.
I'm afraid that's.
I mean, that's the thing. Like you did it before. Why you stopped?
I'm getting a lot of compliments about it. Now.
And that's
you're doing a really good job.
I heard that you have to mess up really bad so that you never get asked again. But here it seems like you're getting set up for success.
Set up for success.
For success.
For success.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
All things in general, you know, I can't complain. We have a great life. Very.
Awesome. Well, Tom, it's exciting to have you here. You know, like we said, first guest, and so we want to give you just, you know, I guess we could all kind of tune into what we know, Tom, but I don't know if we all know who Tom is, right? So, Tom, I mean, if someone just were to ask you that, you know, when you're meeting them, what would you tell them? Who is Tom, right?
Well, you see, so Tom's a father. He's a grandfather.
Okay.
He's a dog father.
Yeah.
Right. I'm
missing the Godfather.
I've spent the last 20 years building a career in corporate real estate.
Okay.
I, apparently, according to Cheryl, I'm a man of advanced age. Based on an earlier conversation.
Advanced age.
You got to unpack that a little bit, Cheryl. You got to explain yourself.
I was referring to someone that was old in terms of how they.
No, but you got to say it how you said it, because the way you said it, you're giving the caveat before you.
I said there's this gentleman, and he's up in age. He's like late 50s, early 60s. The caveat though is that he looks much older than that, because he is not in the greatest of shape.
Sure.
He does not.
I think it was the 50s that kind of just threw everybody off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
And then you attached old to that same sentence.
right,
and
old and
everyone's
then
like,
50s is not something anybody wants to hear in their 40s and 50s. You know what I'm saying?
I get that. I get that. It was for those of you that are listening that are in your 50s or 60s. I'm not calling you old. You are not old. I'm referring to a specific individual that is older than the age on his birth certificate would lead you to believe.
Some would say that the AC situation was kind of intentional to you, what you're thinking, because of your thoughts there.
I mean, hey, look, I've been in a hot environment for a very long time.
Maybe it's messing with your.
It might be messing with my brain. That might be what it is.
There you go. It might be, but
one of the cool things, I'm going back to even Tom, like that I noticed from your, because I met you through your ministry. You and your wife. I had heard about your ministry before I even moved to Palm Coast. My brother-in-law Elton said, we go to these friends of ours from church's house, and they have this enormous table, and they do potlucks on a regular basis at their house, and it's kind of like their ministry, and they invite different people from the church, and it's pretty cool. And so when I came, I think within a few weeks, this happened to be one of those times, and we went over to your home, and it was great, and that's when I got to meet you, and that was my first time actually meeting Abby.
Yeah.
I think that was my first time meeting Abby. But tell us a little bit about that, because that was, for me, coming into a new church, it was very welcoming. Like, I felt like, wow, this church is actually really friendly and really nice, and I felt welcome from the get-go, and that was a big part of it. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that. Cause
Yeah, first, I'm apprehensive when people refer to it as a ministry. I feel like it may hang some burden on it.
Sure.
We really want it to be this. It's lunch with friends. It's a safe environment.
Yeah.
It's a place for those that maybe don't have a place, and it's also for those that do, and to kind of just pull together in fellowship.
That's good.
I hear you.
But where it started, it was because it was a potluck that led to my conversion.
Really?
Whoa!
Right?
I did not know this. Okay.
So I mean, I was as a young man, as a child, I was I lived in a 2-parent home. I was loved. I was encouraged, but there was not a lot of religion. I was given moral standards.
Right.
But there was not a lot of church going or connection to that. And I would say, from the time I was 10 to 45, I maybe was in a church half a dozen times, and that would be for a wedding or a funeral, right? And so my wife, conversely, was raised in the church. And when we got married, she had gotten away, but she felt a draw to go back again. And so she was making she had found a church and was getting excited about it, and I was supportive, but
Not really.
still like,
kind of apprehensive. Yeah.
I'm okay, But then one day, as she was kind of telling me about it, and I started asking questions, as wives will do, she looked at me and says, "Well, if you want to know, why don't you come?"
Hey,
Right?
that's it.
So and I did what husbands do. I said, "I'll give you once a month."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll try it.
Right?
Right.
I'll try it.
Yeah.
I will underpromise and overdeliver. Okay? But when we got there, it was the church was very warm. And I would say after a couple of visits, the pastors made a point to introduce themselves to us. And there was the pastor's wife in particular. She was this really huge personality, right? And she walked up to me, put her finger in my chest, and she says, "You know what you're doing? You're coming to my house for lunch."
Wow. And
she
she had never met you before.
She had met me,
or just seen
but
you.
yeah,
But
it was like
okay.
This was like
Wow.
she was
First,
like,
like, yeah.
Wow.
You're
like,
and she says, "And I'm going to introduce you to a bunch of people, and you're going to meet my son, and you're going to love him because he's like you."
"Oh,
All right.
Okay.
Wow. Very.
Right? Okay, let's go.
Like, all right.
So we go and we connect, and it turns out that her son was teaching a Bible study. And I was like, and he was taking a very intellectual approach.
Okay.
Right. And I think that's where I was. Is I needed to like, I never, while my wife has introduced me as atheist before, I was an agnostic. I would say I believe there was something greater than me out there. I would have attributed it to God and Jesus, but I had no foundation. So I sat through this 13-week Bible study, and on the other side of it, it led to a baptism.
Wow. This is with her son?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Well, that's wild.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
And the direct nature of it, where it's like you are coming to my house. It was
right.
like,
Yeah.
you know, wow.
Yeah.
That reminds me of the story of Zacchaeus.
Right.
That literally was in my head, but it was
I'm
it was
going-
reversed. Like,
Yeah.
I am going to your house.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But
You know?
it's just that intentional. Like we have a plan. Like we have a date, whether you know it or not. Like
I'm gonna be there.
we got something happening.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So how did you guys continue to go to that potluck and hang
Yeah,
out with
well,
those
what we did
individuals
is
and people?
we followed our lead, right? So
Wow.
we started having it at our house too, and so
Oh wow.
it just it went from week to week to week, and I always joke. I said everybody was blessed except for the neighbors because it'd be
All the
30, 40
cars.
cars
Yeah,
out in the
they're
parking lot,
like,
right?
Yeah.
What are they doing?
And it evolved over time. In the beginning, there was like kind of a version 2.0 of the Bible study. I would say it wasn't until we got here that it really became what it is today. And it is a safe place
Yeah.
for people to share opinions
Yeah.
while they're trying to learn and unpack it all
Beautiful.
on their
Yeah.
journey.
Beautiful.
Right?
That's it.
Because, like I said, I was converted, but I was converted intellectually. Right? Like, I'm a regimented person. I moved right into legalism. I can follow the rules.
Right.
I can do the
Easy,
steps.
easy.
Right?
Yeah.
That makes sense until it fails.
Right.
Right.
Right? And so you start to realize that, okay, I'm only doing that because someone told me. And it's like God said it. That's good enough for me. It's like I need a little more than that because what I'm hearing is that this God is personal.
Right.
Right?
In relation.
This God can forgive a sinner like a Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah.
So it's like, surely, me not understanding that today,
Yeah.
he can work with me on that. We can get there.
Correct.
Sure.
So
Correct.
yeah.
That's powerful.
That's really
And so
powerful.
that's what we
I
want
love
at
it.
that table. Is
Yeah.
that, and we have it because there's people that come from various backgrounds.
Yeah.
And you feel it when even though when you're just meeting you guys, you feel comfortable quickly. And I think that's a gift, really. To
Yeah.
and I think we
Hospitality,
talked about this
yeah.
before too. I think people underestimate how fast you can become friends with somebody when you eat with them. You know what I mean? When you spend that time together eating and stuff like that, that it's a very powerful thing.
It's a very personal thing. I mean, you look at in the Old Testament, especially in New Testament too, like you talk about Zacchaeus. It was just if someone invited you to their home for food, it was like you're pretty much part of the family, or you're coming under my protection, under my household. I'm going to provide for you. You think about Abraham when he feeds the strangers. He's like, no, you guys come sit under my shade. We're going to provide everything for you. And obviously, here it's like you can put stuff, hot pockets in the microwave, right? Or, but over there, you're gonna go find the lamb, kill it, cook it.
There was a process.
So you're there entertaining the guests. So it's just and obviously now it changes because of the brevity of stuff to cook. But what I like too is just that beautiful aspect of it, right? It's like you're coming into a safe place in a home, but they've done studies too about why people stay in the church, and they found that on average, the people that end up staying in the church end up staying because they have at least, I think it's 5 personal connections with people in the church.
Yeah.
And if you don't have at least 5 connections, like friendships with people in the church, it's very hard for you to stay, right? And I'm curious to see, I mean, we don't have to answer that, but if we thought back in our lives and whoever's listening and watching, right, if you're in the church and active, you maybe have more than 5, right? But you can for sure count at least 5 maybe families or individuals that that, hey, we're connected. I mean, you think about One Accord, right? That's 8 singers.
Yeah.
It makes total sense. I think I almost would say that I would say you're and this, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I would say your satisfaction with your church. I'm not talking about
that's another point.
With God and Jesus and everything, but your actual church membership, your church congregation satisfaction is probably directly proportional to the number of connections you have in that church.
No, that's true.
And the relationships and people, because that's a big deal. And I would even say like my old church and other churches I've been to, you have some friends, but But it makes a huge difference when you feel like totally immersed, at least with a group of people, not with everybody.
Yeah.
But the connections is a big thing.
Yeah.
And that really didn't hit me till right now. That's super important.
That's
and that's something that I think established even from us meeting you guys there, where it's like, well, hey, we have friends now.
Yeah.
You know, even though we just got here. So
it kind of goes to what we talked about in one of the episodes in season 1 about community. And how important having that community is. And I feel like, you know, when we go over to your house and have lunch, like, you're building a community right there. And so, you know, obviously the church is a community, but this is even more personal,
more intimate. Right?
More intimate.
I think this is taking. I mean, the church, in my mind, this is where you fortify, but then there's another 167 hours in the week, right? And so this is where you can go and take that and expand upon it.
Yeah.
And you know, again, it's like that environment. You know, we really wanted it to be organic.
Yeah.
Right. There was a period of time where we said, you know, should we try, kind of craft a devotional around this? How do you? And you know, sometimes there might be a little gossip in the beginning, right?
The catching up,
right?
Did you hear about? Yeah.
But then somewhere along the line, the topic will always go back to something spiritual, and not just. It's something that someone that's been weighing on someone. It's like, you know, I've read this, or I've always followed this, but you know, it's like being able to share that but in a group and not worry about
being like
what's
judgment, right? Like,
not being
how are the
not be invited next month.
Like,
I'm not coming back.
Loud.
Right.
That's powerful. I love, you know, just how you said, right, it's such a Holy Spirit thing, right? You know, I think we always have that guilt sometimes. I got to tell someone about Jesus, but it's like there's times where, you know, it's just a coworker and like, hey, you know. And then you might have that moment where it's like, you know, just naturally, organically, the conversation, even from them, right? So it's a beautiful thing there. I've been thinking about this a lot, and the idea of like repetition, what is it called? Repetition what deepens the impression, right? Is that what they say, right? Yeah. And I've been thinking about that now, as you know, we have a new pastor that has come as a senior pastor, Pastor Marcus, who's been awesome and really cool. And we've been doing a lot of visits to families, and I've noticed that because I've been connected with people, right? Compared to how we did visits early on with those individuals, now I just come in. It's even like that verse in Hebrews, come in boldly into the houses, right? So I'll come in and be like, "What's up?" You know, and I'll come sit on the couch already, and I think about like, okay, whoa. But it's because I've already established a relationship with them, right? They trust, you know. So there's already that. Where Marcus is coming, is like, hey, you know, is this okay? And I'm like, yeah, dude, go sit down.
Come in, man, have a seat.
Hey, there's water in the fridge. Go get some. And they're like, yeah, you know,
open the pantry.
And I've been sitting there, and I've been, you know, as we've been doing this, I was like, man, this is crazy how just that, you know, I guess it's how friendship and community grows, right? You just get that repetition, and you get more comfortable.
That's huge, though. What you guys are doing. You guys visited my mother-in-law. I think it was last week before. But that I've been going to church my entire life. Usually, if a pastor is coming to your house.
Trouble.
It's something either bad, someone's dying, they're coming because you requested a special meeting. It wasn't just, hey, we're just coming to check on you and meet you.
Right.
And I'm telling you guys what, that is a powerful thing that you guys are doing, because that is creating just a strong connection, and it's bringing people, like, you just feel comfortable. That's big. No, I think that's huge. That you guys are just doing that just to connect and meet people. That Pastor Mark is trying to get to know people. That's a huge thing. I've never seen a pastor group do that. I mean, January for me was really, you know, this is where got inside track, but it was really like I need to be intentional about this. But I've seen people come back to church that maybe weren't as coming as much, simply because I visited them. Yeah, man.
I'm not going to call people up, but it's just like I went, and then before I was like, hey, we want to be members here. I'm like, you haven't been coming to church in a couple months? Like, well, yeah. Oh, yeah. We like this church.
Was Philip Simon one of your professors at school?
Yes, yeah.
So did he feature his Christ method
alone? Yeah, he had all those
right?
books of Christ. Yeah.
Right. Think about that. He
love it.
He did a seminar at our old church, and we actually spent a lot of time talking. And, you know, I still remember his 4 S's, right? And socialize is the first one. He talks about Jesus' method of evangelism. Socialize, sympathize, serve, save.
Look at that.
We always do it backwards.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? Let's back the truck up and give you all the knowledge so we can save you
and hopefully
before we get to know you.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's true.
That's right. Yeah, that's true.
Without that connection, you're not even an effective witness.
Yeah.
If you don't care about me as a person, I don't even really care what you
I got to trust you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So Tom, how has your experience with like church been? I know we talked. I mean, thanks for sharing that beautiful story there. And I love that, you know, it kind of feels like, you know, you just, to me, it's like that guy that had the demons he wants to follow Jesus, and he's like, hey, go back to your city and tell everyone. It's like you this worked for me to come in. Now I'm going to keep doing that. And then we're going to start having potlucks and stuff. But what's been like your, relationship to church? I mean, because, we're blessed here, I think. The culture here has been ingrained, and it can always improve and get better. But there's a culture here kind of that is like the culture that you have with Abby of hospitality and invitation. But what's your connect? Do you feel like a lot of churches have that? When you look at the grand scheme of things and how churches operate, what do you think?
So, we visited a few churches, and I got to say that it's not always the case.
Yeah.
Now, but in fairness, so when we first moved to Ormond, we were between this church and the Daytona church.
Right.
We literally sit dead smack in the middle of the two, right?
Yeah.
Same commute either way. And we kind of visited both. And there were attributes of both that we liked. And I got to be honest, we weren't, we weren't overly welcomed, right? We, Pastor Bob said hi and stuff like that, but there was not a lot of, pulling us into the fold, so to speak. Now, we probably had this false expectation, in fairness. So then we sat down one week and said, you know what, we're going to be part of the problem, we're going to be part of the solution. Right? Yeah. So it's like, so we started inviting people over.
Wow.
Yeah. And, so I think that's some of it. And we unfairly may have, hung a burden on the church that wasn't fair. Right? And so it's like, okay, this is something we can do.
Yeah.
Because I think that's, I don't know, it feels comfortable. It feels easy. Right. It's not a stretch. Like I said, as someone who didn't go into the church, I mean, if I'm being honest, I find some things become very ritualistic and seem to be diluted in meaning. Yeah. Right. We do it because that's what we do every week. Right. Yep. Set your watch by what's happening next. Right.
Yeah.
And so to, again, find something that is a little more fluid.
Yeah. Organic,
right?
like you said. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, and it's funny because I've heard. I wonder, and because you're a pastor too, so you see a lot of this stuff. But like, I've heard from other people, one of the reasons that they don't like coming to church is that there's just so many things that happen before like what they feel like they came for. They came for the message, right?
The music. Or
they feel like there's like a million things that happen beforehand. And they're like, I don't have the 3 hours that it takes to go to church. I really want to go and hear a message, right? But I'm wondering if some of that the fact that it is the same kind of thing every single week, right, in the same order, if that's a turnoff to some people, right? I never really thought about it because I've been going to church my whole life, right? Yeah. But I wonder if that could be a turnoff, that it's not organic. It's just like, okay, this is what we do, and then finally we get to,
I think for some it's a double-edged sword, because for some it's like, this is home.
They like that.
Yeah. It's like when you think about holidays. This is what we cut the turkey here. We eat the we eat this. This is home. And for others, you're you feel that sometimes too. It's like, man, let's change it up. I'm
But then you run into people that are really resistant to anything not to change, right? There's resistance to change is a big deal.
Yeah.
It's probably not just in our church. I'm sure in many churches,
sure.
it's just one of those things where you change something up. It's like, wait, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think you have to be comfortable enough to say, hey, you know what? This sermon may have been for someone else today. Yeah.
Right.
This message probably touched someone, So you can't, they're not all for you. You know what I'm saying. Right?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. I remember you're the one I used your exact words because we talked about this a couple of years ago, I think, when you were like, hey, kind of, you come to, in our church, right, we have different worship groups, and even in those worship, just different styles of music. So even Tom, I remember saying, hey, look, one weekend you come and it might not be the music that you like, right? I look, the country music, the Southern gospel. This time it's a little more contemporary. It's like, all right. And Pastor Bob used to say it all the time. Hey, come next week and you're going to hear something different, right?
Yep.
And Tom was like, hey, it's okay,
Right.
Maybe today it wasn't for me. And I think that's kind of the expectation that we set for what is church, right?
Right.
And I love that you take it a step further. It's like, hey, we come here to be fed. And sometimes we come out feeling bloated because, wow, it was amazing. Yeah. Sometimes you're like, we took the scraps and we felt like the dog from that, the lady from that story that, all right, the crumbs and all right, well, but then you go home and you become the church, right? Where you are like, now we have a space where, hey, Pastor Sebastian said something interesting. I didn't agree with him, but what do you think? And that's where the true, after hours church, to me, the actual church where you start, digesting and saying, hey, what did you think? How did you, so I love that.
I what you do and what that table provides. I kind of liken it to the early church, and they weren't. When I read, especially in Acts, it sounds like they came together to meet and to discuss so they could then go back out and do.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. And so
it's like a launching. This is a launching.
It's a launching, right?
That's good.
And so it wasn't, everything I'm doing is leading me to this point. No, this is what I'm doing so that I can then branch out and do a bunch of other things. And I feel like, coming to church and being in this assembly of everyone, you come in, like you said, 1 week you may feel more full than others, but then you can go to your table and you can sit down, and that's where the real meat comes
and you feel
in,
blessed by it.
You
You're
really
like,
do.
man, I really feel like filled. You know what I mean? Not just food,
yeah.
like just filled. Like,
and it's funny, you were mentioning, sometimes it feels like sometimes you come to church, you're just sitting there watching the clock, like, all right, when's this guy gonna be done, or when is the service gonna finish? I feel like every time that I'm over by you guys, I'm sitting there and we're talking and we're talking.
When are these people gonna leave?
yeah, you're like,
I had the same thought though.
we go to bed at 7. When's this time?
He's like, oh, let's go for a third plate, bro. Come on, man.
There have been times where we've had such good discussion, and it's closer to the wintertime where the sun sets earlier. You look up and the sun is going down. You're like,
it's
oh
nighttime.
man, I
gotta
It's time
go.
for us to go.
Right.
We've
Like,
overstayed our welcome.
Right.
It is
I
Sunday.
feel like now you're
It is
intruding.
Sunday now.
Yeah, but that's because the discussion is so good, and you're like you said, you feel free to discuss without any shame, or someone say, hey, how dare you have that question?
That would never happen. Yeah, that would never happen.
Never happens.
Not there.
Never happens.
I love that.
I would say if I ever have like one mission, if you will, is encouraging people to consider alternative positions.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you have to agree, but we have to learn to listen.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because then that's the only way that we can grow. I mean, we can't condemn blindly. You will never build that trust, build that relationship if I cannot understand your position, and that we can talk it through.
Right.
I usually at these things I just like to ask certain questions because they weigh on my mind. Say, how do you think you reconcile the God is in control with free will?
Right. And those are great questions, right? Because then you're building a faith that's not, like you said, just because God said so, but because I'm understanding it. You know what I mean? I think God wants us to understand things. You don't understand unless you ask.
I think you're 100% right. That gets into this concept of moral development, right? So it's in the beginning, you have young children, right? And so you teach them differently, right? So early on, they need reward and punishment. Don't touch that. It's hot. You'll get your hand slapped, right? You don't do that with a 25-year-old. You can teach them how the stove works.
Right.
And
Depending
so
where they're at.
Yeah.
That's good.
And I think that's the key. That's where that for me is what helped me reconcile, right? A lot of times people say, man, the God of the Old Testament and Jesus, I'm trying to, it's hard to
That's
see
a
the
great
connection,
point.
right?
I love that.
But he was dealing with people that were at a different spiritual maturity, and they had to have that level of communication, right? Versus moving forward to where a different message could be understood. I think,
good.
the whole idea, if you don't understand, then we're minion.
I love that.
And that's huge even in ministry, right? Or witnessing. You know what I mean? When you were witness to, it wasn't like, hey, we're going to sit down and go over the Beatitudes today. It was like, no, come to my house. Let's eat. And I think that's huge as a takeaway for us and for anyone listening too, is when you're trying to be, I think, who God wants us to be in our communities, you have to start at the personal, individual level and just show genuine interest, right?
That's what I was going to ask. I was like, how, with your work, and I know you do some traveling a lot, online. How do you feel like this principle? Because I feel like this is not just a principle of how you view church, but just a life principle too, of like, I want life to be about me, allowing a space at the table for anybody I encounter, right? So I don't know if you've had any situations with work or just neighbors or something where you're like, hey, that you could share.
I don't know if I have a specific story. I like to think that I encourage those same principles and try to model that and influence that with the people that I work with. It's interesting. An intern interviewed me one time. He says, what's a unique feature that you'll look for on a resume, a differentiator you may see with someone? I said, well, I'll look and see if they ever worked in hospitality. And they're like, well, why is that? I said, because they understand service.
Yeah.
I said, because their living was based on how well they treated people.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
That's true. Wow.
Right.
So I never thought about it that way.
That's huge.
That's good.
Yeah. So
That's powerful.
So that's we try to look. Everyone has a level of confirmation bias, right? And they'll go into their kind of perspective. And so trying to just get people who are well-intended, subject matter experts, and trying to tone them down and say, listen, there may be something happening outside of your visibility.
Yeah.
Just consider that.
That's good.
Before you respond.
Yeah.
And it can diffuse some situations that otherwise could be,
No, that's powerful.
not go so well.
I see it a lot, just as a pastor, and I talk about that. We're privy to a lot of, personal information from families and stuff, and you'll hear other people, well, pastor, they don't, blah, blah. And I'm like, if you only knew, and you can't, I can't share the information, but if you knew what we know about what they're facing, or sometimes we don't even know, just like you said, just give them the benefit of the doubt, because we're all going through so much. And I love that, the hospitality principle.
So we get that one little piece of just saying, just before we bark, just consider. Right? Because oftentimes the folks that will be strong in their position, they haven't dealt with that type of adversity, right? It's funny. I had a friend one time. He said, I'm not good when I have money. He had a lot of money and he lost it all. He says, when I have a checkbook, I don't need God. Right? It was because he was dependent on other things, right? He could, he didn't have that physical need.
You don't feel the need. That's it. That's it.
Yeah. Oh, that's powerful.
Until some of these very polarizing topics, addiction, suicides, all the other different, political topics that are hot potatoes right now impact your life, you've got to give people latitude.
Yeah. And I think that's just the principle that I'm feeling for this conversation, right? Just allowing a space at the table for anyone, right? Because you want to share or model what you've experienced, right? The love of Jesus, how it's transformed you, more than intellectual, just this idea of community, but also just having seats like this where you're able to, hey, let me, have you thought about a different point of view, right? Or, here's Omar who thinks very differently to you, or might even vote, differently, or has a different stance. Let's hear him out.
Yeah.
Because most times now, social media, COVID was so polarizing that you just get to that point where
you're either for us or against us.
That's
it. Like, you're either on our side or
you're at the table if you agree with me.
Right.
But you're not allowed to come to my table if you don't agree. So
what you're describing is the essence of the gospel. Love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah.
And so, your neighbor can think completely different from you. Your neighbor can be your enemy,
right,
if you will. Love them anyways. Make room for them at the table, regardless of what they think, how they think, because that's what God did for us. If you really think about it, because we are sinners, we are God's enemy. And He said, I'm still gonna create room for you at this table because my character is that I love you regardless. And so when you're loved like that, you then want to reciprocate that and do that for others. So that's powerful. That's the whole essence of the gospel.
So then one of the things that I was going to want to ask you guys and Tom as well is, what do you think we could be doing better, right?
I like that.
Because that's the thing. What are we going to do with it, right? People that are listening to the podcast, like, what can we be doing with our interactions, right? And as a church, to make it a place where people feel that, because the comfort that we feel at your table or in here in this room, or
there may be people in here that don't feel that.
You know what I'm saying? Like, why? So how can the church become a safe place for that? Right, to feel like, hey, we're gonna talk about things and we're gonna be open about stuff and stuff that's taboo or whatever. Like, how do we make an environment in a church that is reflective, or that's similar to what we experience? I mean, granted, it's a bigger group, right? So in your home, it's more intimate, so you might feel more comfortable. But is there anything we can do as a church to make that more a reality, right? Make that more comfortable.
For sure, yeah. I would say I think you have to have spaces for different stories or whatever it is, positions to be shared and always continue to present. Hey, you have to come, like James says, slow to speak, slow to anger, and quick to listen, right? So just be willing to, that's why you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. But I think a lot of it, though, just because the sheer size, I think, I would consider what you do kind of like a life group, right? You're living life with other people, and we're big on that. Obviously through COVID, it's it's kind of hard. It's been, we're trying to get people back into that. But I think in a corporate level, like with 250, 300 people, it can be hard. You can model it from the front, right? But it's in these intimate moments, right? That's why I think the early church exploded because it says they were meeting at each other's homes.
Right.
Right.
It was a lot of
They
small
met
groups,
at the synagogue as much as the Jews allowed them. Right. They did that. But what really made it was, hey, 3,000 new converts, who can take them home? All right, Tom, I got 10. All right.
Yeah.
Tell them about Jesus. And it was very simple. Hey, what do you know? Oh, Jesus came, died, and he's coming back for us. All right, cool.
Yeah.
What do we do? Let's go, sell your stuff. Let's put it together. So it's, I think that even though I think we should be always presenting that from the front, but it's like, I think where the true magic happens is what you guys are doing, right, at our homes and just saying.
So there's a lot of power in small groups.
I think so.
I mean, the small groups
so.
is kind of a way to kind of do that, right?
Because you're modeling in what you could do here for one, you can do it in 30 homes, right? As opposed to just at one place here. And those 30 homes can be with 8 people, you time, whatever. And you have just that powerful. And I think that also shows Jesus' ministry. He was always like kind of one-to-one, no matter what was happening, right? The woman that's bleeding for 12 years, he stops.
He saw her.
It's just me and you right now. And you're like, that's crazy. Jairus and his, he's going to Jairus' house and he's with, so it's just that intention. Zacchaeus, right? So he was really intentional in the midst of everything of trying to get to the smallest number to be able to connect with. And I think that's maybe one of our goals that we could do to make connection.
I think you're right. I think the intimacy matters.
Yeah.
Just think about if you've ever been on or even just in a large group and you say, hey, raise your hand if you have a question.
Right.
You don't get a lot of that, right? But you split all those people up into groups of 5 and you get a bunch of questions.
Yeah.
Right?
Everyone's got a question.
Everybody's got a question.
And there's enough
point.
time for everybody to talk too, It's like.
So I do think at that corporate level, you will always have difficulty trying to get that level of participation. And honestly, it can be difficult to manage anyway.
Right.
Right? I think modeling it is the right thing. Sometimes I wonder too if even the concept of denominations becoming polarizing and becoming ways to drive wedges.
To segregate. To
segregate, right?
Segregate.
To further separate.
We talked about that on one of our episodes last season.
Why are there so many?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
all claiming the Bible as a single source of truth.
And if you didn't believe it was true, your particular group was the truth, then you wouldn't be part of it. So, we're Adventists. We believe certain things. I have friends that are Mormons, that are Lutherans, and they believe certain things, and they're just as convicted as I am. You know what I mean? And we're all serving the same God, right?
Yeah.
So,
and can get caught up in the differences rather than focus on the similarities.
The similarities. And I made a joke, we'd be in heaven. It's like, all right, let me get my Lutherans on the right, my Adventists in the back. Right. We're not going to have that in heaven. Right. Heaven is not the Adventists and the Catholics and the Lutherans and the Baptists. It's God's people.
And I think I had some Jehovah's Witnesses come knocking my door, and so I was out there. I was like, hey, you guys want some water? And I was like, you guys are. I affirmed them because I was like, you guys are doing something that not many people do.
No,
in this blistering heat, you're walking full suit. So we started talking. One of the guys was like, man, you know your stuff. I was like, yeah, we went to school for this, right? But I was saying, look, I think, we have different interpretations of what happens in the end, what happens with believers, who Jesus, which there's a time and place for that. But I think there is that spot where we have to, for you to be able to come to the table, you have to agree that we're going to the same place, right? We're going to Tom's. Here's the address. You're going to sit here, bring your food. And once we're there, then the conversation begins to happen. I think. Because most of the time we just come ready to fight, and so I think that if we are able to change that, because even the way we talk about other churches and other people, right, whether it be denominations or other faith religions too, the way we talk about them is just like you just drive a wedge and you're just building up barriers. And then what's crazy is like you were talking about confirmation bias. You talk about different things. We just pass that on to our kids, right? So they grow up, and their kids, they teach. Why don't we hang out with them? Oh, and this is kind of the idea of racism, right? That it's taught. It's like you just continue to perpetuate that idea. Oh, as Adventists, we don't associate with those, or we believe those people are, and so it's like if we're able to even change how we communicate about others, on top of like doing life with people, right? I think that would go a long way in changing how our churches function.
Yeah.
And it becomes a more attractive place.
It does.
Oh yeah.
Right. I mean, that's people are attracted to places to non-judgment, right, and to acceptance.
But
and that's a big thing. Like you said, there's more similarities than people realize between. There's more things that bring us together than bring us apart. But we always focus on what do we do that they don't do, or what do they do that we don't do, or they don't. You know what I mean?
We'll fight over eternal torment or instantaneous death. It's like, don't we want to avoid both? Are we both aligned on that one?
Right. We don't want either of those things.
The thing is, it's scary though. Think about Jesus. Working with the people in his day.
Yeah.
for the outside, this is attractive, right? What Jesus was doing. This I hear, seat at the table. It doesn't matter who you are, come. But for the people in the church, this is scary because it shows. It feels like you're compromising your truths. You're not really living up to what you believe. Mm-hmm. It's like, when do we stand? And it's because I think it goes back to what is our foundation, right? Is it up here about the 28 things we believe, or about this? Or is it about the people and the relationship?
Well, and you look at Jesus' ministry, how many times was he compromising the truth, right? And they were like, what are you doing? Your disciples are doing this on the Sabbath. Or what? You know what I mean?
Hanging out with prostitutes and sinners,
what are you doing?
Like,
what are you doing?
Like,
Why are you doing this?
Why are you with Matthew's a drunk? It's like,
you're touching lepers?
What's wrong with you? Like, it was always a constant, like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? And I'm connecting. That's what I'm doing. You know what I mean? I think that's kind of the key word, I think, of even our discussion tonight is like the connection. That's huge.
It's good.
It's powerful.
It's the crossroad of what church is, right? And so when you get there, is it just going to be a personal, just for me, intellectual faith, or is it about, just as much as God has given me grace? And I that's another element too. I think of Abby's story too, right? That story of Jesus is eating with who's the teacher, Simon, right? And then Mary comes in and then he gives him the parable and says, she's wasting money. He's like, well, who do you think is more grateful? The one that was forgiven a lot or less, right? And so I think that happens sometimes too. If it can be a problem. If you're born in the church, you didn't really do the whole worldly, what we talked about, right? You're like, they don't deserve the love of God. It's like, well, they feel so grateful.
Who appreciates it more,
right? So it's like it's so layered, but I think it's powerful what you guys are doing, continue to do, and I'm excited to get invited hopefully next weekend. But.
Well, after this podcast, everyone's gonna be like, so when are we going over to Tom and Abby? You know what I mean?
It's a good thing we'll put the address in the description below.
Tom's like, show up on a random Saturday.
Please do not. Please do not do that.
2:00.
I'm not.
The cars are all the way out.
Oh man,
but but it ties in so good, I think, to what we've wanted to talk about in general is just what things can we be doing better. And I think that's huge. I think creating that space for people one-on-one in our communities or in church, and that's what people feel. That's what I think is what attracts people to coming to church and then staying in a church. You know what I mean? It's like I feel accepted here.
They know me.
They know me.
They've taken the time.
Yes.
And I think that's where you'll see the greatest growth in people is when people feel that they are accepted, not because they have changed a bunch of things, but because people have accepted them for who they are and said,
simply because
I don't care about all of that other stuff. You're a human being. I care about you. You're important to me. Come spend time with me.
Well, I think it frees them to then go be independent thinkers. I would say that's the other thing with church is how can we encourage people to be independent thinkers so that you come to these conclusions on your own. It's not because it's the mandate. It's not the doctrine.
It's what everyone says,
right? It's because God and I, we came and reasoned together, and I get it. And at the same time, like I said earlier, we're close enough, God and I, to where you're going to have to work with me a little more on that one because I don't see it.
It's not hitting for me right now.
And that's okay.
I want to do it, but I don't see the connection. That if I use the litmus test of like love God, love your neighbor, right? And we say, the law and the prophet hangs on that. I can't see that being condemned. I can't see the single mother trying to provide for her family, working on a Sabbath, being condemned.
Wow.
From the God that is known as that is love. I can't see that. I can't reconcile it. I don't
and you feel comfortable enough to like because that's a relationship. You explain, that's awesome. And you serve a God that's willing to say, hey, let's talk this out.
Right.
That's what he
wants.
Beautiful. That's what he's looking for. He's like, finally. He's like, finally, this is where I want you to be. This is the relationship that. And I think we go into now our denomination. We've lost the roots. You think of how our early church started, and it just started off from being at the table and figuring out, we messed up, not understanding what this prophecy meant. Let's study. And everyone's like, dude, I think it means, so it was this coming together, asking those difficult questions and saying, what did we get wrong? And then building from that. And then they found out different, this and that. But we kind of lose that in order to preserve what we have, we lose what God wants to continue to do. Right. Yeah. And it's a sad thing to see. God tells, I think that's Isaiah, God tells the people of Israel, hey, don't be so caught up. I'm doing a new thing. Right.
Yeah.
But you're going to miss it if you don't get so caught up in the Egypt and take, it's awesome, Red Sea, but I can do more greater things here. And I think we get caught up when we want to preserve what we have here because of fear that,
Well, it's stunted growth.
Right.
You have to be able to move past that, right?
Yeah.
So it's we had some friends over and we used the analogy, right? He's talking about his son washing his hands when he leaves the bathroom. I said, like you can teach him to either where there's a punishment involved if he doesn't, or he can learn that like, oh, that's our rule in the house, or he can do it like, I'm washing my hands because I love mom and dad, so I'll just do it.
Right.
Or, he gets a little older, he learns about hygiene and germs and things like, right?
Yeah.
In all situations, hands got washed. But it wasn't until the end that there was real comprehension, right? That he understood why.
Yeah.
That's the only way that was going to sustain him once he left the house.
Right.
Yeah.
That's it.
Right? So you
That's
think
good.
about that, right? It's the same type of
And like you said,
metaphor.
that's the actual growth, right? Doing things
That's the growth.
because you were told to isn't the same as doing things because you want to.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what God wants is he wants you to want to do his will, not because you're worried about getting
you
caught
have to.
or getting in trouble because
That's
of
right.
it, but
I
because
choose
I
to.
want to do this, because I want to please
It's
you.
a starting point for when that is your level of development, right? And I think, the Sinai message with the commandments, they're coming out of slavery. Pharaoh had been the most powerful figure in the world for them. God had to be powerful. He had to be specific. This is what the expectation
You said
is.
this parent-child, right?
Yep, parent-child.
Yeah.
No, we're coming over here. Get away. Yeah, I'm getting rid of everything that is
Don't
going
do
to
that.
cause you to.
Don't do
great
that.
That's a
Don't
great
do that.
analogy because
Yeah.
it just it as much as you don't want to do, but it humanizes God in a way that's more understandable for us to see. Okay, yeah, we do that as parents, and as they grow older spiritually,
You change.
And then I think as you grow, you don't see them as lists of what you can't do. They become almost promises, right? And it's not that you're doing it to appease an angry God, and if you don't, it'll disappoint him. It's because these things keep you connected to him.
Yeah.
Right? If you think like, to me, I was thinking about like, thou shalt not kill, right? That's like maybe the worst one on there from a humanistic standpoint. We have biblical evidence of resurrection, right? God has raised people from the dead. So God could fix that. But you know what he can't fix? The hardened heart of the person who does the murder.
That did it.
That's good.
Right?
Yeah, right.
He can't fix that because he can't legislate love. You can't force it.
That's
that's
good.
huge.
That's good.
That's huge.
That's good. So it's reinterpreting, re-seeing,
Reframing.
refocusing. Yeah, that's good. That's powerful. Wow, Tom, thank you.
Hopefully that's not heresy.
No,
Pastor, but
No way. No,
We sat there
it's-
like, well, we're gonna talk about that next episode.
No, but that's huge. Like you
I
said,
love
like
it,
he could reverse the killing.
powerful, yeah, because
But
that's
the heart that chose to do that,
right?
The problem isn't the person dying. I mean, it is, but it's like I can fix that. It's like you said, it's the heart that's powerful.
He can't change the heart unless you allow him to.
That's right.
He can't.
That's
He
free
can't
will.
force it.
That's right.
He can't force it.
Love
And it's
can't
like-
flip a switch. And so, you start things like, these biblical questions when you read it, it's like, the great commandment, love God, love your neighbor. Well, you can't love like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I gotta unpack that one a little bit more, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And what does that look like?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where you go into Tom's house, makes everything make sense. But Tom, thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts. You have been amazing, and just like Omar said from the beginning, just being invited to your house with Abby, being open about your stories and upbringing and all that stuff, and seeing how God has led you and your families, and then you're pouring out just with love and just helping people feel welcome. I think it's been amazing, and so we're just so glad to have you as part of our church, as models of this having a space at the table. So thank you for that.
Well, it's a pleasure to be the first guest.
Yeah.
Great hanging out.
Yeah.
And absolutely, we'll definitely plan a lunch.
We'll do it. Yeah. I mean, next week. I mean, because we had the big potluck here.
Yeah.
So you're welcome.
Yeah.
So
Well,
now it's your turn to pay back somehow. But
we'll see.
I'm gonna take out one of these questions here to move as
Talking
we go
point.
into our talking point. Was it yellow last time? Well, okay. This is on the world around us. Do you think that religion has a place in politics? If so, what is it?
Ooh, that's a good question.
We'll keep it. I'm not worried about what's going to be said, but the length of it.
Right, the length of it.
Yeah, maybe we'll just keep it to a yes or no.
Man, I've always been of the mind. I'll start, I guess. I've always been of the mind that religion is not something that should be legislated in any way, shape, or form. You know what I mean? And anytime I see that, even if it's stuff that I personally agree with, I don't like it. Yeah. I think it's a very dangerous situation. They're so different that God, if you look at how God deals with us, it's not legislated love, right? You can't legislate the love. So when you start getting a lot of religion in with politics and religion kind of being the underpart of politics, you start getting into that dangerous church and state kind of a thing. And I don't like it. Even if it's stuff that I agree with, and I'm like, yeah, I'm on board. That's how I think. I don't like to see them mix. So I think they should be maintained completely separate. And you know, you kind of blur the lines. It can get dangerous for a lot of people. So yeah, I don't like it at all.
Okay, so you're taking more of the church and state. Yeah,
I like it separate. Angle. I don't want to. You know, I don't like to see that. It's because that's not how God treats us. That's why. You know what I mean? God, they're just so different. You know. Yeah. So I'm definitely on the side of keeping them separate.
Yeah, the conversation we just had. You know, God is a God of choice, of free will, and so He's not going to mandate you must love me, and if you don't love me, no. It's your choice to love me or not. Now, loving me comes with benefits, and choosing not to love me or deciding that you want nothing to do with me, there are consequences that come with that. But that's up to you.
That's good. You know? That's good.
And so when it comes to politics, I prefer that religion and politics stay separate because I want to have a choice for myself. I don't want a leader telling me you have to do this and you have to do that, because that's not how God operates. And I don't want someone else to follow and to kind of join a certain religion just because they feel like they have to do it.
Well, and it's whose religion? Whose religion are we? You know what I mean?
Today it's yours and tomorrow
it's
right. Yeah.
Right. So I think the two should be separate. I don't think I will say, I guess my caveat is, I don't think as an individual there's anything wrong with engaging your religion to help influence the choices that you make. If you're a politician and you are a Christian and you say, I don't believe in murder, so I'm going to outlaw murder, I'm okay with that. But don't say, hey, everyone needs to be a Christian and we're not doing this because you all should be this religion, or we're no longer going to observe this religion. I don't agree with that.
Yeah, that's good. Tom, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I tend to agree with both of these guys, particularly from the perspective of God's law of liberty, right? It's the freedom to choose. And I do think that when you get man involved, it's going to be right. Which religion? Right? You're going to draw straws. You're going to vote on that. How do you come to that conclusion? I mean, the best you can hope for is that you're selecting leaders that have the character traits of someone who knows Jesus, right? And that we see compassion and empathy as well as bright intellect and sharp management skills.
Sure.
But yeah, I don't like seeing it combined because for the same reasons.
Yeah, that's good.
Are we a Christian nation? You hear that term kind of thrown around, like, the dollar bill and God we trust and all this stuff. And people talk about the founders. I know I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but do you guys feel like, because I hear that a lot, like, oh no, we're a Christian nation. And it's like, I know a lot of people that aren't Christian at all. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, just something that kind of popped into my head. But
and so do you think they're do you think they're not Christian, or maybe it's because they've got this picture of God
that's not
and
accurate.
That God is someone that they don't want to have anything to do with, right? Because they've been polluted mentally.
I think, it'd be interesting to have that conversation. From what I understand, a lot of I think a lot of that goes back to the early founding fathers and the Constitution and all that. And a lot of them were deists, right? Which was the idea that God created, but just let the world he's not really involved in the world, right? Yeah. So that's an easy, God created us, but we run this world. And it's like, no, we don't, so do you want to call it Christianity? Some people might say differently. But to answer your other question, right, the other thought there, I agree with what all of you have said in terms of church and state. I do think it is hard. It's kind of like when someone says, you have to read the Bible as if you have no cultural lens. And it's impossible, because you have your confirmation bias, you have your experience, what you've been taught. And I think the same thing when it comes to politics. I think it's almost impossible to vote yourself, apolitically, I think there's principles, and that's one of the principles that I've been growing in recently. Is like when I vote now, or when I exercise that response, or that ability, right, or that right, I'm now trying to apply the biblical principles and saying, okay, we understand that God doesn't enforce, but now also when I vote, how am I voting for the best interest for those around us, right? Mm-hmm. Now, that's a catch-22 because sometimes I can vote for something that may interest some but not others, right?
Mm-hmm. Always.
So it's always, right? It's going to be a tricky thing. But I think it might be hard to say my faith is not going to influence me when I go vote, right? And I don't think we want that type of faith where I check it at the door, and here I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, all right, now I'm back. So I think it's hard because, politics is just, it's like, the original word coming from like a people, city, right? So it's like, it's what you're involved in that, right? And what happens in everyday life. And your faith should play a part. But I think what we're agreeing is that it does play a part, but we're not out of our view of God, we don't believe in legislating what I believe to everyone. Because I wouldn't like it if everyone did that for someone else that believed different. That's my thing, right?
Yeah, that's it.
We want to put prayer in schools, but then what if you have someone that maybe practices Islam?
Right.
Or that does, so... and I think a lot of times you see it that either the church becomes the persecuting power, as we saw all throughout history, or it comes back to backfire and you become persecuted because you were the ones now, the same the things that you set up to, maybe stop others or stifle others, now comes back to bite you. So it's like, it's hard. And I think that's why God, when they ask for a king, God says,
you don't need it.
He's like, we want to be like the other people. It's like, why? And it's like, so... I think until that day, we're never, even if you had a Seventh-day Adventist as president, right, which would have been interesting, right? But I think until God is the true ruler who can truly rule out of a selfless, loving place, the rest of humanity, we're just kind of like trying to, pick the, we say the worst of the best of
the worst.
We're all fallen, messed up beings, and so whichever one of those fallen, messed up beings you choose to run it, there's still going to be some messed up, fallen stuff that happens
that you don't agree with. And I think it's understanding where your true allegiance is, right?
Right.
Is it with the United States? Is it with your home country, Mexico, whatever? Or is it, hey, I'm waiting for another land? I'm still being a good citizen here, but I'm a pilgrim here.
My mom always says that this is just a via. And I used to be like, what are you talking about? She said, I am a citizen of heaven via earth. So this is just the
That's good.
That's just via. I'm just here for now. My destination is there. I gotta stop here to get there.
That's good. That's good. Wow, great conversation, Tom. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Again, guys, great conversation. And for those that are listening or watching, we encourage you to again subscribe if you haven't already to YouTube, Instagram, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Comment, like, and share it with anybody. I think this was a powerful conversation. You can share it with a couple of people, and maybe there's something you agreed with or disagreed with. We'd love to hear from you, and just reach out, and hopefully you'll keep tuning in and joining us in these wonderful conversations.
Absolutely.
Awesome. We'll see you all, and we'll talk to you all in the next episode.